Never Mind the Buzzwords is a community event from Jigsaw Better Business. Taking place bi-monthly, its aim is to build a community of businesses and professionals where you can learn, share and connect. It's about going beyond the jargon and coming away from each session with knowledge, tangible tools, tips, strategies, and hopefully an extended network. Each event is focused either on people or a process. In the process sessions, we talk about how we deliver value in our business. Topics here include lean tools and thinking, operational excellence, sustainability, and digital transformation. In the people sessions, we look beyond the process to the who, discussing topics like leadership, teams, culture, and professional development. Never Mind the Buzzwords isn't just an event that you attend, it's an event to participate in. So get involved in the conversation, put your camera on if you can, share your thoughts, ideas, or questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. And don't forget to stay in touch. We have a LinkedIn group where we upload resources and recordings from this community. And if you follow Never Mind the Buzzwords on Eventbrite, you'll be notified whenever we post a new event.
Good morning, everyone, and you are welcome to August's Never Mind the Buzzwords. This is the process buzzwords, as was said in the video. So we have two different types of events every month. We have a process event and we have a people event. And today we're going to be talking about process mapping, but really kind of getting from process mayhem, where there's maybe chaos and disorder, then actually extracting that process from what's actually happening in the organization, and starting to map and to document what that process is. So you're all very welcome, and thanks for joining us here this morning. Just to start with what today's not a 60-minute lecture on process mapping, and where we're going to detail the benefits and the styles of every single process approach to process mapping. And what today is what all Buzzwords events are around. It's about kind of sharing and connecting you with people who are on the ground doing these activities, and hearing from them and their experience and leveraging their expertise. So today we're going to introduce very briefly what process mapping is, why we would actually do it within our organization, some of the common types of process maps that exist there, what the approach or how we go about starting the process map within our organization, some of the pitfalls and the challenges that we face, and really kind of linking in process mapping to process improvement as well. And today we're joined by Eamonn McKenna and Kasia Oelofese, both Master Lean Practioners here with Jigsaw Better Business. We're going to come in on some of the slides here and share their experience of being at the front line of working with teams to help them to mind their processes, to understand what's happening in the organization, and then to support them to get that documented, all the way towards with the role of improving that process as they go as well. Just as a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be recorded, and we will pop it up on the YouTube channel afterwards and share that link with you as well. At the end of today's sessions, what we're going to do towards the end of time, we have some optional breakout sessions. So when we finish, we have 3 breakout rooms, and myself, Eamonn, and Kasia will be in a breakout room each. And if you have any questions or you want to pick our brain about anything, you can opt to come into that breakout room at the end of the session. The breakout rooms won't be recorded, so you're free to share within that as well. Okay, so let's start. What is a process? Well, a process is any kind of series of steps, a combination of people, tools, materials, and methods, where an input, like flour in this instance, is created into an output like bread. And we might have 7 steps in our process. We might have 7 high-level steps in our process. We might have 700 steps in our process. But anywhere that an input is converted to an output, it usually follows a process. Now, a process can exist even if it's not documented within our organization. So it's important to remember that even if it's not documented, it can exist within the business. So a process map is a visual representation of business processes, its related activities, its input and its outputs, and it helps to model the business process. So Why do we do it? Well, process mapping visual represents the work process that we do. It identifies problem areas within the organization. And not only that, it helps us identify opportunities for process improvement. It provides a common understanding of the entire processes within our business, the specific roles that people play within it, and the contribution of the process participants. Before we can improve a process, it's really essential to understand the process. And process maps help us to streamline the work activities, help us to tell new people when they come into the organization, but also help us to tell customers as we onboard them in our organization, how do we do things here in this business? It also helps us to, in the effort to reduce cycle time, okay? So to improve the process, so reduce cycle time, avoid rework, start to identify waste in the business, and really help us to prevent errors, because as we start to document the process, we're actually able to see and measure mistakes and issues that happen within it. It helps us to determine where the problems start to occur in the business, in the process, or even to help us to determine what is a problem, what is not a problem. Because a lot of cases, people think within their processes that things aren't problems. So perhaps help them to identify that they are problems as well. So there's some of the reasons why we do it, that visually represent the work that's there, and really to start us to help us to streamline the activities. Before we can improve anything within the organization, we really have to start to understand what's happening there first. Now, some of the common types of process maps that are out there, and you'll all be largely familiar with these. And as I said, we're not going to go into huge detail on any of these here today. Really, we want to use this opportunity, this limited time that we have together, to talk to people who are actually expert in this. We can go off and read about the process mapping on the internet and any one of a million resources as well. So some of the common types then are swim lane. So just your simple process map. So your simple process flowchart or process map. A swim lane, which is also called a deployment flowchart. A Sipoc, which stands for suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers. And then a value stream map. Okay, they're just four of the most kind of common ones as well. Now you can add layers of complexity into each of these process maps. We can put in racy charts with them, roles and responsibilities for people as well. We can add various levels of detail, pictures, images, but they're the four kind of core, most straightforward, most common types of process maps. So I'm just going to go through them briefly one by one to get started. So simple process chart, really it's talking about starting, it is really just documenting in the most simple way your process, okay? It's best to start at 30,000 feet. So start from a very, very high level as well. So we've a couple of key shapes. I'll just go through the four main shapes, the three main shapes for a process map or for a flow chart. We have an oval for the start or the end of the process, okay? So the start or the terminator. We have a rectangle for each process step. And then we have a diamond for where a decision is required. And just a simple arrow connecting each one of them. We also have additional symbols, and there's charts of symbols available out there. You can go and see them, and they're also available within many of the process mapping tools. So we can have data containers like here. We can have documents, multiple documents, and we can have delays here as well. To give you an example of a process map from 30,000 feet, if we decided we were going to have eggs for our breakfast, it might look something like this. Pop the egg in the pan, bring it to the boil, take the lid off, lid on, heat off, leave for 6 minutes, egg out of pan, and then eat and enjoy. A very high level, 30,000 foot process flow chart. If we wanted to get closer to the detail, and what should be included here in this simple process flow chart is transportation methods, start and stop points, the decision points, inventory and storage points, how many operators perhaps are required at each step, and what the process parameters are included here, and also the responsibilities of each step and the people who might do them. Here we have a 500 square foot or 500 foot view of that process, and you can see it's much more detailed. We go much more granular on the steps that are involved, but we always start at the 30,000 feet. Start there, high level, and then dig deeper from there. And this is an example of a simple process flowchart where we document an observed process within our business. Next up from that, we have a swim lane or a deployment flowchart. And this can be used to transfer our 500-foot basic flowchart into swim lanes of a deployment chart. Okay, this starts to add a little bit more complexity to the chart, and it gives it a very useful view. And it gives it a useful view is that we start to see who the parties are that are responsible for the steps. Okay, this can be individuals within the business. These can be departments within the business. It can also include our suppliers, and in fact, it should include our suppliers and should include our customers as well. We draw a lane for each group or each stakeholder within the process, and then we either horizontally, you can do this horizontally as it's done here, or vertically, and we divide it up into lanes. We then document the process across these lanes, okay, and stating where the process actually changes. One of the advantages to this is it starts to show up where decisions are required and perhaps where bottlenecks can start to occur within our process. Eamonn, you're nodding your head there about the swim lane and when I mentioned about the delays.
Yeah, if we go back to the previous slide, Stuart, the 500-foot view, as you referred to, in a lot of cases, what I will do on that particular map there is I will put the role or the title that's actually carrying out each step along on top of each box. So like go to the fridge, that's going to be, I'm going to put your name down against that because you're the guy that's going to do the particular task. For the go to the shop, well, that's not going to be you. That's going to be somebody from procurement is going to go to the shop. So that's the name.
I kind of feel like this is a personal dig at me here. That I'm the
it is because anytime I send you to the shop, you come back with all sorts of stuff.
I feel like I'm being ruffled here. I'm be given away. Yeah.
So what I would suggest to people is that if they can identify the task or the doer of each step there along the way, it will go a long way for them to see what's going on. If it becomes a very complex map, then definitely transfer that back into the swim lane. But what you will definitely see then at that point is even the overburden on certain individuals to get right through the thing. So in the swim lane, you'll see, Stuart has only got one step to do, where the guys that work with Stuart all the time, well, we've got all the steps to do, for instance, if we were to break it out into a swim lane. And then we're looking at all the work that the guys that work with Stuart have to do. And we're kind of going, how can we re-level the load here a little bit and maybe move some of the bits back up to Stuart just to balance the load for everybody. So it's just a great visual for everybody to see what's happening and how tasks can be shifted from one to the other. Just because we always done it that way doesn't mean to say we should.
Okay, so as you're at this level, you're at this point with the simple flowchart, you'll start documenting who it is doing which part of the process as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And just kind of to row in with that as well, I mean, what I'm showing you here in terms of process maps are finished process maps. They're ones that have been documented. And I know Kasia spends a lot of time after she's created a process map with her teams, documenting it in a very visual and a pretty way. We're using tools like Visio. I mean, one of our favorite ones here is draw.io or Lucidchart. But the work goes in at the very simple stage. Is that right, Kasia?
Yes, and it's like I like it pretty, okay, because it's kind of, you can put it out there, it's very visual, you can very easily see what's happening, but the work you're doing it's actually when you're making that into, digitalized form and you make it very visual and, as we say, pretty, as supposed to readable, it's helping you to walking through it. So I think, the goal of the process map when you're making it is to be able to walk through it, to identify, is this map what is really happening, or is this map what we think is happening? And you kind of start, connecting those two, because sometimes when you're doing the process map, it's very easy to kind of go, but this is the way we're doing it, being mixed up with the way we should be doing it. And it's kind of when you're walking through it and the one thing which I want to say, and probably Stuart is going to be talking about it, is to having the right people in a room to kind of catch you on the fact that you're talking something as should be versus this is the way it is. Okay. So that digitalization of the map, it's for you to have it somewhere visual and using it when you have, and as Stuart said, when you have a training, when you're going through the process saying, okay, where, you know, what is really happening here, and have that reality check versus your map, because the map is for you to use it. It's not for you to be pretty and sitting there on the wall and nobody's looking at it. It's for you to kind of use it and questioning, is this the right way that this task is being performed?
Okay, perfect. And yeah, we'll come to that when we get to how we actually start to implement it out as well. But yeah, like it starts with a fairly crude, and when we get to the approach, I mean, perhaps Eamonn and Kasia will come in and talk to us about how they actually go about what's the first steps in creating these as well. But if we go back to the swimline, really, it's just the sequence of activities across the various stakeholders, and taking what Eamonn has said there from the simple flowchart with the names written on it, to actually putting that into lanes. And we see this particularly useful in software development, website development, any kind of process where something is made where decisions are required by other people, really helps us start to identify bottlenecks within a process. And it also helps us to start phasing a process into project or stages that can be each brought to completion that require an external decision. So it allows people to see what work they can progress in one go before requiring a handoff, and see the handoffs that are there as well. Another very common one, and I suppose a favorite of ours, is the Sipoc. And Sipoc is a diagram, or a Sipoc diagram is a tool used by a team in an organization to identify all the relevant elements of a process improvement project, quite often before work begins. So it helps define when you're going into process improvement and projects, it helps define a complex project that perhaps is not already well scoped, or the process isn't really very clear. And typically it's deployed at the define and measure stage of a Lean Six Sigma project. So the DMAIC, to define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, but the Sipoc comes in there. So it's really useful when the suppliers of the inputs are not clear for a process, when the specifications, what specifications are required to be placed on inputs, who the true customers of the outputs are, the true customers of the process, and the requirements of the process here as well. So example of a Sipoc there for a lunch order delivery, we can see that the suppliers of the inputs, the input is a lunch order. The person who supplies the lunch order is the lunch patron. Then we have the process for delivery of lunch order. Greet customers, take the order, deliver to the kitchen, prep and cook order, plate the order, and then deliver the order. The outputs are the bill, or the check as they call it on this slide here, and then delivered lunch orders are the outputs as well. And then the customer, the person who receives the output, is actually the lunch patron, or the actual customer as well. Some of the requirements or the metrics there that we could be using in this process would be on-time delivery, that it's accurate, that it's correct, and that it matches. And for the bill, we can see separate accuracy here in terms that the bill matches the menu prices, and that it's delivered in a timely fashion. One of the ways to go about creating this would be to start with flip charts, map the process in 5 to 7 steps, identify all the outputs of the process, identify the customers of the process who will receive the various different outputs. And if you can, as I said, you can see here we've actually added in a sixth and a seventh column for the process requirements, okay, and for the customer requirements. So it's okay to add them in to put some kind of level of measurement or performance on the process as well.
Stuart, when I would invariably meet a client for the first time, I'll very often complete a Sipoc with them or a Sipoc with them. It gives me a great overview of the business from start to finish. But a couple of things that kind of surprises them an awful lot is that they suddenly realize that they become suppliers and customers of their own business. And that's a real wake up for starters, because they always see the customer as the guy who pays the bill down the far end of the chain. They never think about the guy next in line who's actually picking up the widget from that you're handing over to him or whatever. And the other big benefit of doing that 5 to 7 or 8 step process down the middle, just at a high level, starts to set up boundaries and scopes on the actual 500-foot view that you're going to go looking at. So you can kind of go, right, where exactly is the problem sitting? Is it step 3 or step 4? Now we have an obvious starting point because we know what the inputs coming into that are. We know what the outputs should be. And now we've got boundaries set up around it. So we're in a safe space.
Okay, so using it at that point as well. Kasia, are you going to come in there?
Yeah, no, I actually just want to kind of probably reinforce what Eamonn said. It's exactly the same what I do. And sometimes when I have a customer coming to me and they kind of going like, we know we need to do something, we need to change. It's not working the way we want it. We want to be more efficient, but we're not really able to put the finger on it because it's, you know, it's overwhelming, because everywhere we go and look, it's kind of something has to change. I always say to prioritize, to kind of make yourself a little bit, you know, less overwhelmed by amount, you know, of processes that you have to look at. Let's do the Sipoc. And exactly the same as Eamonn, the first thing which I would do in a complex situation, I would say, okay, well, let's look at the Sipoc. Let's kind of map out, you know, in that way, the high level view of the company and start kind of digging, saying, okay, where are the problems are happening, so we can zoom in into that space. But you are very, then, you know, as Eamonn said, that you have defined your boundaries, you have defined kind of saying, I know where it's coming from, I know where it's going. So even if I zoom in, I'm still very aware from that high level point of view, you know, where is what's happened upstream, what's happened downstream. So if the problems that you discover in zooming in into that particular point, you can very much easier to kind of go, oh, wait a minute, that could be caused by things which happening upstream, and you have already that lovely high level view there. So you can kind of go saying, I'm zooming, next step is zooming into that area and have a look what's happening there. So I actually really, really like Sipoc. I've been using Sipoc for many years, and I've been using Sipoc with small organization when, you know, when the things are still very not defined, we don't really see process, but also big organization when the processes are there and we're aware of them, but they are overwhelming. So let's just kind of make them less overwhelming and kind of make them more structurized for ourselves to know where we're going next. So very important at the very beginning of your project to do that, to making sure that your problem statement and what you actually look to improve, you know, is that's what you actually want to do. Yeah.
Okay, and it really is that start of this mining process, which is when I popped that in the title of today's session, people are like, what do you mean by mining? By mining, it's starting to like uncover, because people say we don't have processes documented in your organization, and just because they're not documented doesn't mean that they don't exist or that they're not there. They're just undocumented. So it's a matter of going in and kind of starting to uncover what that process is. But tools like the Sipoc, especially here as well. I mean, I started with a client last week and they came to me with a 37-step process for how to do something within the organization. And we just started working through each one of those steps and very quickly found that we'd left out quite a lot of bits just by starting to observe the process and by following tools like this, which we'll cover in the approach kind of later on as well.
I just, if you don't mind, Stuart, I just want to add one more thing. This is also, Sipoc is also really good for the fact that we actually looking, you know, that inputs and outputs and kind of seeing who is, you know, that as Eamonn said, it, the internal customers, so the internal customer, internal supplier, and it's like what that process needs, what kind of inputs that process needs, where are they coming from, and the quality of them, and they can help you to start at the very beginning to kind of say, where are the data points? What do we need to measure? Because you have very kind of, you know, start having clarity of your inputs and your outputs, and you can start putting metrics around, which is kind of another conversation, you know, about the process and how you measure success of your process. So your, you know, your leading and lagging metrics, and that's the place when you can kind of start clarify that one. What is it that I need to measure to know how this process performs? And I find Sipoc absolutely like great for that. It makes it so much easier for everybody.
Yeah, and the point about the leading and the lagging metrics is really interesting, because I think one of the things we can see here with this Sipoc, I'll just see if I can zoom in a little bit on it here, is that with the addition of these two columns here, so we have process requirements and customer requirements, it starts helping us to use metrics around what we do within the organization, because a lot of businesses don't have KPIs, or they don't measure within their organization, and they say, because we do whether it's a service process or a manufacturing process, they say, oh, we can't measure it, we've no KPIs. Where in fact, once you start to document a process and you start to see where things can go wrong or go right in the process, so the customer requirements or the process requirements, we can then start to actually put performance indicator or metrics on it as well. And perhaps that's something we'd pick up in more detail at a future session of process mapping with a very metric focus as well. But the Sipoc, again, remarkably simple tool. You can spend a lot of time on it. It's time well spent as well. And really important in problem solving within the organization, to get us started on a continuous improvement initiative along the DMAIC lines as well. Another one a lot of us in the lean world will be familiar with is obviously value stream mapping. A value stream map visually displays the flow of steps within a process. It visually displays the delays and the information required at each point to deliver the product or service to the customer. The value stream analysis really is the analysis of the flow within the organization. We start with a current state map, and we try to identify all of those barriers to flow. We start to identify the waste within the organization, and we start to calculate in more detail, so the likes of the total lead time of the process, as well as the process time. We start to want to understand work in progress, or understand WIP. We will start to understand change over times, percentage completes, accuracy metrics, all of that for each step. We could do an entire, I don't think an hour would even cover it on value stream maps. I don't, just people spend their entire life at it, and perhaps it's a topic we'll come to in more detail at another session. But value stream mapping ultimately, within an organization is where we need to get to. But today we're talking about kind of coming through from the chaos and the disorder and the unknown into kind of some kind of order first of all. So it's that order first, and then we bring it through various levels of order. Kasia, Eamonn, did you want to come in anything about value stream mapping?
To be honest with you, Stuart, it's something that I would never attempt to do with any of our clients. We don't, from my point of view, we just don't get the time to spend with them to do it. It would take so long to do it. That said, when we're going to our process mapping, we can be gathering some of that data, some of that information, and just recording it down. Remember, like I was saying, I will often capture who's actually completing the task. I might put in get a time in against it as well. So we're capturing elements of it, or I certainly will be capturing elements of it, but I've never ever sat down and done a full VSM with any client. I think it is, I think it would be just too much in the short term for them.
I might just qualify that before Kasia comes in. It's some of the work that we would do within Jigsaw, which Eamonn is referring to, are with smaller organizations, so kind of less than 50. And the value stream, they require work to unmuddle the processes before getting to full value stream analysis. It tends to be something that larger organizations would need to do, rather than smaller organizations. Not that there's not value in it, but just that it depends on the company size, I suppose, and the resources they have to manage it and to document it as well. Kasia, sorry, you were going to come in there.
I like value stream mapping, okay? And I learned to like it probably, recently, in the last couple of years, more than before. And why I like it, okay? And I do that sometimes with my customers, especially the customer who have production, okay? Because what's happening with that, it helps people to break down what's happening in the production, okay? So it's kind of like help them to see what are the natural kind of, boxes of the production breaks between production steps are. And therefore, like, looking at the lead times, looking at the cycle times, understanding that, how long does it take to do something and why. And therefore that value stream mapping, I don't necessarily do very complex one, but I like it, like, I have a number of customers, and those customers would be, they producing number of things, and just kind of breaking them almost like, okay, there's that part when you prep something, then you maybe paint it, then you maybe you have to assemble, and then you kind of put it in the warehouse already to installation, things like that. And it just helps them to understand the the lead times, the kind of where are the inventory seats, meaning that you create something and it sits there, and it helps to understand the single piece flow, which I absolutely love. And again, that's kind of recently I got into loving it. Took me a while, because as a human being, I'm a human being, batching, it's written so deeply into us. But that single piece flow and explanation to people, what you rather have. Do you rather have 3 things done and ready and delivered, or 20 started? And that visual part of it really helps to see it in that kind of environment, saying, okay, well, we, as this example shows, we have lots of drying and molding, but everything sits there and nothing gets assembled, so nothing really is being shipped. So kind of I don't understand that the bottlenecks in that kind of production setups, I find it just like mind-blowing. People can see it straight away and go like, oh my God, I never saw that.
And just in terms of that point, so Eamonn was making about the use of value stream mapping, and the complexity and the detail involved in it in a smaller organization versus some of the bigger organizations that you've experienced with Kasia.
Listen, you know what it is? It's like anything. When you start getting comfortable with it, it doesn't really make any difference, because what's happening is just the boxes kind of either get bigger and the numbers get bigger, and maybe cycle times get smaller, and maybe the inventory get bigger, but it's just the numbers really around it. So you kind of, just the natural way of saying, okay, so tell me, what do you do? And it's again, what do you do with that thing to get from A to B? And it's very, I would say, and it's the same with a process map. When it gets complicated and complex, start from the end and work backwards to the front, okay? Because when you start with the end saying, okay, well, what is that thing that we're shipping? How often do we ship this? And then you kind of saying, oh, what's happening before that? And as you have packing, I packed this. Okay, so, how many do you pack? How many people do you need? What is that? And then you kind of say, okay, before you're packing, what's happening then? And you say, okay, well, I'm testing, yeah? And you kind of walking backwards helps you to kind of take away that complexity, because when you have a big companies in complex, you kind of go, oh, that goes here and that goes there, and it's becoming a little bit too much for you, because there's so many avenues. To kind of manage the avenues and number of options, walking backwards really, really helps. And it helps me. As I said, I'm a human being, and my brain sometimes goes on the mission here and there. That's the way I am. To help myself to kind of go, okay, what is it that you produce, and what that we do with all the inputs that we get to that output at the end. The other thing which I use the value stream mapping with, okay, so big, small, it's probably, the more you do it, the more you're comfortable with it. Walking backwards would definitely help when you have a bigger company organization. Choosing, again, what is it that you're trying to do here? So choosing your product, saying, I'm mapping one product, I'm not mapping all of the products, okay? Once you map one product, you kind of saying, okay, well, what's similar? And you kind of start creating families, and then therefore your value stream mapping become less complex that way. But the reason also why I'm doing value stream mapping is that it helps the production planning, okay? And there's lots of on the production planning that people kind of, special, like, new companies and new people into production, they kind of say, well, when I get the order, I just deal with it, and I hope for, like, I do it in 2 days. You get like keen and you want to deliver it. This really helps for you to understand what is that customer demand, how much do you need to produce, and what is required for you to meet that customer demand. And I'm really sorry if I'm going too much into details, but I just find it really helping people to kind of saying, once I get the order, I can see all my orders, I can really comfortably plan what do I need to actually do in order to meet that customer demand at the right time and in the right quantity. So another metric on time in full, you know, so you can plan for that. And that's kind of, that's why you're creating those things. This is the reason why you're creating. So it's not only for having it somewhere nicely, but to understand what is it happening, where are the bottlenecks, and how can we do that, deliver on that customer demand at the right time and the right quantity.
Okay, brilliant. Just a comment in the chat here from Mick McAuliffe. One of the important things to remember with BSM is that it should capture the information flow, the information flowing back within as well, because sometimes it's that information flow that starts the bottlenecks and the constraints within the process. So you're not all nodding your heads to agree with that as well. Okay, the next, I'm just going to open up the results of the poll there as well. So I'm just sharing the results of the poll. Everyone should be able to see them. So we can see that less than 25% of the that 30% of the people here, so 10 out of the 33 that answered, have less than 25% of their processes documented. Another third have between a quarter and half of them done, with 18% having 75% plus of them done as well. I think what's interesting there is that while only 20% or 18% have 75% plus of their processes documented, 76% of the people here actually have the competencies in-house to do it. And I think that's kind of interesting. It kind of sets that we either don't have the time or we don't prioritize the time to do it as well. I think I have a more open poll next, which you can start to share, or if anybody wants to pop in the chat why they have, if they have the skills in-house to do it, why haven't they actually gone ahead and done it, or why aren't the processes documented? Is it we don't see the value in it, or we don't have the time, or whatever that might be as well. So some interesting points there in the chat and in the polls. Now let me just go back to the slide. So value stream mapping, yeah, a really important tool, really useful tool. If you're going ahead to use it, perhaps it's not the starting point. Start with a simple flow chart, then move down through the more detailed swim lane. You know, maybe start with a Sipoc, and then as you start to get more metrics and understanding of the process, then into the value stream kind of map as well, making sure, as Mick said in the chat, that the information flows back to the hub or the organizer of the process, that there's no bottlenecks there as well. We tend to think that the only problems in the process are at the process end, but usually there's a manager or a middle manager or two stuck there somewhere holding everything up. Daniel here just mentioning that finding the time to record all of the metrics is a challenge in their business. Thanks, Daniel, for sharing that as well. So yeah, finding the time, you know, and we all familiar with the cartoon. We're too busy. Okay, we're too busy doing the work to make the work more efficient, and really that's what, you know, what lean and process mapping is, that investment of our time and resources into kind of a longer term efficiency rather than the immediate gain of just getting the work done. For a lot of organizations, the processes do exist. All organizations, if you're doing something, if you're converting the flour into bread, whether it's documented or not, the process exists, okay? But if we can't actually, I think there's a Deming quote that says, if you can't describe the work that you do as a process, then you don't really know what you're doing, okay? So if one level is not to have it documented, but if you can't actually describe what happens or how it happens, then we probably just don't know what we're doing, and we need to start in terms of new process approach there as well. I'm just going to open up just another poll as well there. If anyone just about what's stopping you, I'll leave it open there for a while, or if anybody wants to pop in the chat or come in, as I said, just either pop your hand up or open your mic and just come straight in if you have a question as well. Okay, so next we're going to talk about our kind of our approach, or the approach to process mapping. Okay, now I just popped down some very simple steps here about the approach. I'm going to bring Kasia Eamonn in on this as well. Determine the start and stopping points for the process. The stopping point is usually very near to the customer, right? So it's at the end, so close to the end of the product and near the customer. Walk through the process, so walk through the flow, writing down the process steps as they exist. So Kasia said this, make sure it's important to document what's actually happening in the process, not what we think happened as well. one of the things we can do here is as we're going through this process is actually pretend to be the work in progress, pretend to be the part that's been machined, or the problem that's been solved, or the service that's been delivered, and document your experience as you move through the process as well. We can be very general here, okay? So we can be at the 30,000 feet, and we could talk about, you know, machining the part, you know, turning on the pot or putting water in the pot, or it can be very specific. So turning the part, grind to the outside diameter, the bird apart, you know, we can be very specific as well. It gets closer to the 500 feet. At a minimum, though, we need to record the process steps, the decision points, and the transportation methods within it as well. And then once we finish, sign and date the flow chart and give it a version number as well, so we can improve it. We also touched on, you know, the importance of, you know, documenting the actual process. Okay, so documenting the actual process, and this kind of sits around this concept of Gemba, which is the philosophy that reminds us to get out of the offices and get out from behind our desks and spend time on the actual plant floor where the real action is happening. Now, that could be through a screen share for in a service-based businesses, but to watch the process happening as opposed to listening to somebody tell us what they think happens as well. And really it promotes this deep and thorough understanding of real world issues and first-hand observation by talking to the people who are closest to the work. That's the people doing the work as well. Guys, do you have anything to add in on that, on the Gemba concept and the importance of it?
Yeah, for me, Stuart, when I'm process mapping very often, and Kasia, I think, said it earlier on, the key thing is to make sure that the right people are in the room. Invariably you will get, and this is no disrespect to anybody on the call, but invariably you will get middle managers, etc., in the room who have a real good understanding of what's going on, but they're seeing it from a very high level. They don't know the nuts and bolts of exactly how it happens. So the importance of getting, you know, if we're process mapping something that happens on the workshop floor, the importance of getting the operators, etc., into that room is hugely important, because they've got a very different view on life than the middle manager, the senior managers. And I guess what's really important, when we get down what we believe is the process, using the right people in the room, it's so important to bring that back to Gemba, bring that back to where the work happens, walk it through, get it critically analyzed by somebody else who does the task, get them to red ink it the whole way through to make sure that what we've captured is the current condition as we see it, before we start to look at any sort of process improvements at all. That current condition is so important, and it has to be 100% accurate.
Okay, perfect. Kasia?
I mean, I can only agree with Eamonn. Yes, walk the process, always walk the process. And, you know, like, sometimes I like it, walk it before I map it, okay, with the people, and get them to kind of, you know, record the things that they see, because there's a lots of kind of surprising sometimes, like people get surprised saying, I didn't, you know that it's happening. So record the things. It's a good place to record kind of observations and kind of, you know, ideas. How can we do it better? Because when you see it, it's kind of in front of you, especially, you know, and it doesn't matter if it's actually office or is it, you know, production site or warehouse or whatever it is. It's kind of similar process. Have a look, have a conversation, very important. But also walk the process after you're creating the map. Okay. So it's important kind of both ways. Go and see, map it out, go back and see it again and saying, is that actually, you know, is the conversation took us in the right place? Have the right people in the room. It's a key. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. That's a great. You need to start disagreeing about something. You need to find something you just don't agree on. But that's a really good point about going back, you know, after we've walked the process, documented the process, to go back and check that we haven't kind of missed anything as well. What we'll do is we'll pop in, there's a folder there which we'll provide access to, the shared folder, which has a number of resources in it as well. And within that, I'll add these into it after today's session as well. So this is like a process walk check sheet, you know, so, you know, and then rules for a process walk, which you can start to use to inform how you go about doing those process walks. So, you know, what is the process being walked? You know, and some of the rules there, it's about the process, it's not about the people, about being respectful to all the people involved. Like, we're just coming in here out of nowhere and talking to somebody who perhaps has been doing this particular task for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you know, so we need to be very respectful about that as well. And one of my favorites, you know, which really comes from Toyota, is like, be a student. You're there to learn. You're not there to judge the process. You're there to learn what the process is. Be empathetic, stay engaged. You know, rank doesn't matter in process walks. We're there to learn. Don't correct interviewees, so that people don't correct them. You know, if they're telling us, that's their experience of the process as well. But looking for the wisdom, you know, the wisdom of the people closest to the work. You know, they're the people who know the work, know the issues, know the challenges, and they know what the actual process is, rather than somebody perhaps in management or a more distant level saying what they actually think it is as well. So we'll provide those templates in there as well. But it's just about, yes,
Stuart,
Eamonn, yeah.
just on point 2 and 3 there. For me, when I go in to meet new clients or whatever, when I'm facilitating a process mapping exercise, it's super, for the simple reason that I don't have any view, I don't have any baggage on that particular process that we're going in to look at. So I am, you know, the ultimate neutral facilitator in there. But what we've got to be really careful of as well is, and I remember I was saying to you earlier on, when we're bringing the right people into the room, sometimes we're bringing people into a room, into a boardroom or into a meeting room or something, and they're completely outside their comfort zone. So we've got to be really, really mindful of that. We've got to make sure that they get engaged, that we do everything as facilitators to engage them, make sure that we can extract the information that they have, because they're the guys and the girls with the wealth of information. They're the people we really need to talk to.
Yeah, and I think that point about being, you know, that you're neutral, because you don't know you don't know what's right and wrong, and that sometimes that's one of the benefits of having, you know, an external facilitator. I mean, it can be done, or some, not even external from the organization, but external from the process, somebody who doesn't know the process, to come in and help document it as it actually is. Because sometimes when we're too close to it, we start to make assumptions, and people start to say, oh yeah, but that's where this happens. And they know that, so they don't document it, or they don't even see it as a challenge as well. So as I said, there's benefits to having somebody outside of the department or outside of the organization to actually help you to document that as well. Another template I'll pop in here as well is just this interview sheet, you know, zooming in here as well. But again, we'll have it in the templates for you. But a sample of questions that you might ask as you go to the Gemba. Okay, so remember, we want to see the real work, real place, real people. So you know, what kind of questions do we want to ask? What observations do we want to make? And in here we have this, you know, our car park. I'll just zoom in. So what did we see? So when we observed the process, what were our aha moments or our observations? What did we go, I never thought about it that way, or I never saw it like that. And what are potential opportunities for improving the process? And if we do have solutions, rather than starting to focus in on solutions there away, let's just pop them down and let's just park them to talk about at a later point as well. A couple of people just having to pop off. A comment in there from Richard. So if we can't see our waste, we can't improve the processes. Yeah, so really that's why it's important to get out and to map that process to start to see the waste as well. And being that devil advocate here. A question in from Rishi. I'll open it out to you guys. So is there a preferred level in the leadership hierarchy for the process walk interview? Should it be a junior analyst, a senior analyst, a manager, a senior manager? Rishi, do you mean conducting the interview or conducting the interview, guys?
If the question is who should be in the room, then I would say a good cross-function across the board. If we're looking at who should be facilitating the exercise, I don't think it matters so long as the person is, the term that was once given to me when I was going through facilitation training is the person needs to remain passionately neutral. So they're not bringing baggage in there. They're prepared to ask the questions, and it doesn't matter what rank or privilege they have. You could have anybody who can hold the fort, remain passionately neutral, and continue to ask the questions.
Kasia, yeah.
I mean, for me, it's like, you know, when you're interviewing people, you need to just make sure that those people actually perform the task. So the subject matter experts, okay? So there's a different view to the person who is managing, and that's going to be very valid, you know, feedback on those questions, but it's very also important to the person who actually, you know, on the grassroots level performs the task. And why? Because that person actually does it. So they know what is working, what's not working, what challenges they have on a daily basis. And then obviously from the, you know, once you're going higher and higher, you kind of start getting that picture. How does it look? The other question, the other thing which I think is that when you're talking to people and when you're going to the Gemba, because we're talking about the Gemba, you actually at the place. So you do talk to people, you observe people when they're doing. So the senior management and everybody's observing, and not, you know, not to overwhelm people. So you have to prepare people for that Gemba. So you're saying, we are going to see how you're doing. This is the reason why we're doing it. But having that open conversation, sometimes you kind of have to have that conversation, not necessarily led by some senior people, because it can be overwhelmed depending on the company structure. Okay, so some companies are more flat, and that's not the problem. People are very outspoken and ready to talk. Some organization, they're more hierarchy based. So when you actually at that grassroots level, you get a little bit, you know, you're not really sharing the whole picture because you're aware of people who are listening. So just get that into consideration when you're having those interviews. When you're having the interviews, it's good to have them at the place that the things are actually happening, because then you can observe, show me what you do. Okay, what is your experience? And then you can take it to the different place as well to map it out. But you need to kind of, it's experience. The more you do it, the more people get, you know, used to it, as opposed to, because you know, if you never talk to your people, you never really, you know, that's going to be new for them. So you have to take that in consideration.
So, and I'm going to link that in with the next question that's going to come in as well, you know, which is from another Kasia, who's asked, would you say there is a best practice in place to interview several people for one process to avoid bias? And that kind of comes down to this making sure that we've all stakeholders involved. So if 4 people carry out the process, you know, 4 people could have 4 versions. So it's important to have the 4 versions. So, you know, depending on how big or how many people there are that do it, you definitely need I would try and get everyone if it's not too big, or try and get a cross section that then you can go back and take a homogenized or a standardized version back to everybody to see if they agree with disagree on it as well, Kasia. That'd be one approach, but really to avoid that bias. Eamonn, Kasia, do you guys want to come in on that point, that question from Kasia about avoiding bias? Because I mean, that is one of the challenges, you know. So, well, I do it this way and I do it that way. How do you overcome that?
I mean, you kind of, you know, you as a facilitator, you need to make sure that you are, you know, working on that, you know, creating the space of safetyness. Okay, so you are coming there and you reiterate the fact that you are there to learn and that you're not there to judge, or like you don't know the process, so you want to learn. So tell me how the reality look like. Okay, there is going to be always kind of, you know, people will, you know, you as the facilitator has to kind of look at the dynamic of the group, okay, and making sure that you know, facilitate the ones which don't say much to actually come different ways. So, you know, post this and things like that. So tell me, okay, so what is it happening next? You know, the question that you ask, who is responsible for it? And for people almost like, you know, not everybody's talkative as I am and Eamonn and Stuart, okay, to get that post-it and saying, write your version there and let's discuss it. Yeah, so in the points where there's like not much conversation, or you can see a part of the group kind of going, saying, I'm not sharing, like I'm, you know, not saying what it is, because it's obviously a point where the truth, it's not not everybody have the same version of the truth. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. And without getting into the Trumpisms or whatever it might be, yeah, everybody can have a version of how they do things. The point I suppose we're trying to get to really is the best way and a standardized way. And that's really, Kasia, I suppose, to answer that, an additional point for that, Kasia, as well, is that's where the facilitation skills start to come in. So the process mapping is it's an approach, but it's the personality. It's about the people and engaging the people. So there's a level of facilitator skills that are required to facilitate these sessions. And something which we're actually going to talk about next in next month's session, which I mentioned in a while, is, you know, creating a safe space. So the psychological safety, which we all talk about an awful lot, but, you know, really leaving, you know, roles and positions and hierarchy at the door, you know, and going back to that point about being a student of the process, and that you're here to learn. You're not here to dictate what's going on. You're here to learn what's going on in the process as well. Just I'm conscious of time. Some other comments coming in. Richard, sometimes the best information comes from people who are carrying out the role, that remain hidden unless asked. If we miss them, then we might miss a vital step. We're making improvements. So again, yeah, getting out to the process, you know, not in the boardroom, on the factory floor. If we're in a service process where we carry out, we work on a desktop, we're not just describing the process, we're sharing our screen and we're demonstrating the actual process as well. And then from Harry, how do you approach employees that are not believing in mapping the process? I mean, they are difficult and not helping much. Well, I wouldn't say we ever come across that, do you? People who aren't engaged or don't want to help.
I think it's that Harry basically comes down to the facilitator and the skill of the facilitator to involve them. I suppose the old saying, like, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And if they are going to be problematic, challenging, etc., sometimes you just do have to swap them out and bring somebody else in. But I would be loath to do that in the, you know, I would give it all the time I possibly could to bring them around and explain the benefits of process mapping and the whole benefit of the concept of standardized work, which ultimately this brings us to. And they see it from their own personal point of view. I guess people are always afraid of change. And when they see process mapping going on, they're always thinking, what's going on? How's this going to impact me? It's the what's in it for me type scenario. So it's about putting their mind at rest and making sure that we can fully explain to them, you know, why we're doing it, the benefits, particularly from their stand. You know, try put yourself in their shoes and tell them and explain to them what they're going to get out of it.
Okay, and what I've done, just as we were chatting there, because we were covering them naturally as you were going with some of the pitfalls and the challenges. Yeah, people not engaging, you know, it happens all the time. People don't engage. If they're having a very negative effect on the group, then there's an argument for swapping them out. But that's where the facilitation skills really come in. It's not just about being able to map a process. It's about being able to handle you know, differing opinions within the group, and stronger personality, weaker personality, and so on. So that's where the facilitation skills really come in, and it's something we should all consider kind of improving among ourselves as well. Other challenges, you know, not understanding the start and end points of the process clearly, confusing the operation blocks with the decision blocks. So is it a decision or is it a process? The consistency of the approaches, so not using the right kind of process maps, crisscrossing, mapping without the right stakeholders, which everyone has mentioned, not performing the process work through to verify the accuracy of the process, as Kasia touched on earlier on, and not updating the process map as we continue to go as a reference, you know. And as some of the commenters have made, some of you guys, we're just looking at the check and keeping an eye on the time here. Lean or agile or any of these kind of things we're trying to do, it's about process improvement. Okay. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify through the process mapping, through the value stream map, through the stakeholder map, through the swim lane, through any of the process maps that we're doing, we're trying to identify the wastes and the inefficiencies in the process. By doing that, we're identifying steps in the process that don't actually add value, and then we can start to eliminate them. So we keep our value-adding work. at a certain level, but we stop the non-value adding work. Okay, so eliminating steps in the process that don't add value as well. And that's really what we're at. Use the process mapping to identify issues, challenges, and opportunities for improvement. Identify the waste and then start to streamline the process from there. Would you agree, Eamonn, Kasia?
Absolutely. I think the process map is the ultimate visual to start identifying where all the wastes exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, as I said, I'm conscious of time here now as well. So I'm just going to start to wrap up. But just to say before everyone jumps off, if anybody wants to hang on, there are going to be breakout rooms open, and you can come and have a chat with myself, Eamonn, or Kasia directly as well. As far as buzzwords is concerned, first, thanks to Eamonn and Kasia for making your time available. I hope everybody that came on felt that it was worthwhile. There is a LinkedIn group, there is an Eventbrite page, and there is a SharePoint folder that all of these templates go into, which we'll follow up with in an email with the recording of the session today as well. Again, look, I hope it met your expectations. We can go and buy a book, watch a YouTube video on process mapping and how to do it. It's important to kind of hear from the people at the front line and the people doing the work as well. The next session that we have is on the 14th of September, and it's a combination. We've just one session next one buzzwords next month. It's a combination of people and process. We're going to talk about the culture of operational excellence and how that feeds into transformational, authentic, and servant leadership, psychological safety, which was touched on as well, and teams, how teams work together, and then employees and engagement and motivation. So what can we do to create this kind of culture within the organization where people perhaps don't detract as much as well? So I'll open it up for questions. Thanks for the lovely comments in there as well from everyone. For the guys, I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. So if anybody wants to stay on and engage with ourselves a little bit further, you can just pick a breakout room to come into, and myself and Eamonn and Kasia will have a chat with you there. But for now, that's it. Thanks again for your time, and look forward to seeing you again on the 14th of September. Thanks, everyone.